It's the year 1429. You're the English battling during the 100 Years' War as the siege of Orléans rages on, fighting under King Henry VI. You stand confident behind the walls of what you believe is an impenetrable fortress. Victory is within your grasp until suddenly a young teenage girl steps forward from the French ranks. Her banner waves in the air, and with it the spirits of over 2,000 armoured men. The cries of your enemies grow louder as they surge forward, emboldened by this girl's divine presence, terrified knowing you've heard rumours of her divinity and mission to destroy you. Before you know it, your fortress crumbles. The surviving Englishmen that retreated are left defeated, humiliated and awestruck, thinking about how this little 17-year-old teenage girl brutally defeated them. But this little teenage girl clearly wasn't any teenage girl. She was Joan of Arc, and in this video we will be going over the 5 traits that helped her rise to power and save France. Trait number 5, her virtue. From the beginning, Joan was always virtuous. She was described as always being kind from many accounts of her neighbours and those who met her before. Once, Joan gave her own bed to a homeless woman and slept by the floor in the next room. Joan visited the sick and brought them food while being a peasant herself. One witness said that she nursed a child who was sick when she was a child herself. Joan was of Catholic faith, which was to become the source of everything she would dedicate her life to. Whether tending to the poor, assisting the ill, or simply being a source of kindness in her community, Joan's virtuous character shined brightly, long before she ever set foot on the battlefield. Her virginity, a symbol of purity in her time, further underscored her devotion to her faith when she promised to remain pure, taking the vow of chastity at age 12 or 13. When offered to be ennobled by King Charles, she refused, having no interest but in serving God, uninterested in titles or wealth. Trait number 4, her divinity. At the age of 13, Joan of Arc began experiencing visions of saints and angels, which she believed were divine messages. These visions occurred while she was in her hometown of Domremy, a small village in northeastern France. Joan described seeing Saint Michael, the Archangel, as well as Saint Catherine of Alexandria and Saint Margaret of Antioch. In these visions, the saints and angels gave her guidance, urging her to support Charles VII, the Dauphin, heir to the French throne, and help him reclaim his kingdom from the English during the 100 Years' War. They also instructed her to wear men's clothing and take up arms to lead the French army. When Joan met King Charles to convince him to allow her to help, he was in hiding, and many at court did not recognise him. To prove she was divinely sent, Joan is said to have walked directly toward Charles, even though he was disguised in the crowd. Upon reaching him, she reportedly declared, "I am sent by God to help you reclaim your kingdom." Before her birth, there was a prophecy that circulated in France before Joan's appearance was that a young virgin, often described as the Maid, would emerge from the region of Lorraine which she was from to lead France in its time of crisis. This figure would restore the rightful king to the throne and drive out the English invaders. Joan's miraculous rise to prominence was widely embraced by many as a divine intervention. Some historians have speculated that she may have been suffering from a mental illness, such as schizophrenia. Voltaire himself questioned her mental state, suggesting that her visions and actions may have been the result of delusion. Trait number 3, her ability to raise morale and inspire. By 1429, France was in a state of dire desperation. The French had suffered significant losses with much of northern and central France under English control. Charles VII, the legitimate heir to the throne, had not yet been crowned, and his legitimacy was questioned due to the English-backed Treaty of Troyes, which recognised Henry VI of England as the rightful King of France. The French army had suffered many defeats, and with the crucial city of Orléans under siege, it appeared that the English were on the brink of total victory. In this desperate situation, France was in need of a saviour to restore hope and unity. Joan's arrival, with her claims of divine guidance, brought the hope the French so desperately needed. As France seemed to be reaching its lowest point, Joan's presence was seen as a sign of hope, and that victory was still possible, and that it was God's will for France to triumph. She was a symbol of hope to the hopeless. When she joined the siege of Orléans, she would charge straight at the enemy on a ladder which inspired her troops. But unfortunately, she was shot near the shoulder below the neck, which created a deep wound. But she refused to leave the battlefield and pulled the arrow out herself and rejoined her troops, winning a crushing defeat and a major turning point in the 100 Years' War. Although Joan usually waved her banner around, which she made herself instead of fighting directly, she never killed anyone herself but instead helped raise morale. Trait number 2. Her appearance. Although modern-day portraits may have over-exaggerated her beauty, she was considered good-looking for her time, and by some even beautiful, which may have helped contribute to her success. She was described as being around 5'2", having large dark eyes that were very prominent, wearing her infamous bob cut to blend in with male soldiers, having a low-toned but sweet voice, and having dark hair with bangs. According to Jean Jean's steward, who often helped her to get in and out of her suit of armour and slept many times in the same room as Jeanne, described her as being beautiful, strong and well-formed, shapely. The Duc d'Alençon, one of Jeanne's military commanders, described her in the same way. Dolan stated that he often saw Jeanne's body when he had to dress her wounds in battle. He said he never felt lust for Jeanne, pretty as she was, because he thought it would be shameful to have such feelings for such an inspiring and religious person. Trait number 1. Her integrity. After the Battle of Siege of Compiègne, Joan was finally captured by the Burgundians, and when the Burgundians held her ransom for 10,000 livres, which in modern day is equivalent to tens of millions of dollars. But King Charles, the man who Joan helped become king, didn't help her, and she was sold to the English. During her trial, Joan faced immense pressure to confess under threats of torture. She refused, and when the trial judges demanded that she completely renounce her visions and admit to witchcraft, Joan refused to do so. She maintained that she had been sent by God, that her voices were divine, and she insisted that her mission was true. Afterward, Joan was subjected to even more pressure, including threats of execution. The English ultimately manipulated her situation. When she was given a choice between signing a confession or facing execution, she signed a document in which she stated that she had been misled by her voices as a form of retraction and was forced to put on womanly clothes instead of her usually boy-like appearance. However, she later retracted this confession, declaring that she had only signed it to avoid being burned alive, and was later found again, but back in boys' clothing. Joan's retraction of the confession was a clear indication that she did not genuinely believe in the words she had written. In the end, despite these coerced admissions and the signing of a retraction, Joan was found guilty of heresy and witchcraft and was executed by burning at the stake on May 30th, 1431. In 1456, a retrial was initiated by Pope Calixtus III and was led by a new court set up by the church in Rouen, the city where Joan had been executed. This was part of a broader effort to clear Joan's name and restore her honour. The retrial was conducted by French bishops, and the main focus was on whether her trial and execution had been carried out in accordance with church law. Innocence declared. In 1456, the retrial concluded that Joan had been unjustly condemned and declared innocent of all charges. The church acknowledged that Joan had been a martyr, and her reputation was posthumously cleared. The decision also declared her to be a victim of judicial error. She was later canonised on May 16, 1920 by Pope Benedict XV, around 500 years later. Joan's steadfastness in maintaining that her mission was divinely inspired, even in the face of death, cemented her status as a martyr and an enduring symbol of courage and faith.